Jesus asking the disciples, who do people say that I am? Jesus is looking for an affirmation of faith from his disciples, particularly his apostles. Who do people say that I am? You know, they had their ear to the curb. They knew what people were saying. And so they replied, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah, one of the prophets. You know, they kind of throw out to Jesus who people say he is. But then he says, but who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? This is a really important question. Simon Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He acknowledges who Jesus is. He clearly understands who he is. We already know that he had given up his career as a fisherman, and that he was from this very tiny fishing village called Capernaum on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. He was a simple person, a humble man, not perhaps educated like the scribes and the Pharisees and the chief priests in Jerusalem. Hardly somebody you would choose to be a leader or the leader of a church or a Christian community, it seems. And Jesus recognizes who Peter is as a man of faith. And he says to Peter, blessed are you, Simon, son of, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. And so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Wow, that's an awful lot of authority that he seems to invest Peter in. This simple fisherman from an out-of-the-way, poor and humble little place called Capernaum, far from Jerusalem. What's the connection between this and the story of Shebna in the first reading? Well, I believe that if we carefully study the Gospels, that Jesus is constantly critical of the Pharisees, constantly criticizing the scribes, the Pharisees, the chief priests, the religious leaders. He constantly criticizes them. And in fact, they were the ones, in part, who were responsible for the crucifixion and death of Jesus ultimately. They rejected Jesus. The very people who should have known better, the very people who should have been in tune with God's will, were in fact not at all. They were hypocritical. In another place in the scriptures, Jesus says, do what they tell you to do, but don't do what they do. In other words, listen to their words, but not their actions, because they're hypocritical. I think that when Jesus proclaimed Peter to be the rock, as a result of his profession of faith, Jesus invests in him authority that would have otherwise rested with those scribes and Pharisees and the chief priests. Jesus recognizes that they are hypocritical not worthy of the office. And Jesus chooses a simple, humble man to take their place. He says, let me see. He says, flesh and blood, to Peter, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. Flesh and blood. You know, books and lectures and thesis and all that stuff, all that's good. But Peter had faith, a faith that was deeper than simply the written word people might have to say. He had faith that Jesus was the Son of God. And Jesus acknowledges that. I think, what is the lesson for us? Well, a couple of things. Number one, as I said earlier, we need not fear because God is in control. God is with us. God is with us. He's in the driver's seat. He's the pilot. He directs us. And he gives us Jesus, his Son, as an example of love and mercy and forgiveness and sacrifice. And he invites us to accept Jesus as the Christ, the Son of the living God. And if we do that with all of our heart,